Title: She was an innocent virgin, he was an older billionaire, but she stayed on their first night. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The golden light from the chandelier reflected softly across the polished oak table. Lily Carter sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her heartbeat loud enough to drown the quiet hum of the restaurant. Across from her was Alexander Reed, 50 years old, a man carved out of patience and power. His tailored gray suit, his calm, unreadable expression, and the faint trace of silver in his hair made him look like he belonged to another world entirely. "Marry me," he said, his tone steady and unshaken. "Call it a contract." The words landed like a verdict. Lily blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. He did not flinch. He just watched her, his eyes the color of winter steel, waiting for her to speak. I do not understand," she whispered. Alexander leaned back slightly, his voice calm, deliberate. "I need a wife, Miss Carter, a name to protect my position. The board is pushing for my removal, and the only way to secure control is to appear stable, respectable." Lily's throat tightened. "And me? What do I get?" He looked down for a moment, then met her gaze again. "Your mother's hospital bills will be paid in full, and you will never have to worry about money again." Oh. The offer felt unreal, too heavy to exist in the same air as her trembling hands. 19 years old, broke, and cornered by life. Her mother's medical debts were drowning her faster than she could breathe. And now, this man, a stranger, was offering her rescue, wrapped in a sentence that felt like a cage. She glanced at the folder on the table. Inside was a platinum ring and a crisp legal document with 3 bold rules written at the top. No love, no touch, no questions. Lily swallowed hard, her reflection faint in the silver surface of the ring box. It looked beautiful, but it was cold, too cold. Alexander's voice softened, almost weary. "You can say no, but understand this, Miss Carter. Life does not wait for fragile girls." The same words her aunt had told her years ago. They echoed through her head, as sharp as broken glass. She wanted to run, to disappear, but then she thought of the hospital room, of her mother's shallow breathing, the quiet machines keeping her alive. The world had never given Lily a real choice. She signed. Her hand trembled, but her eyes stayed dry. When she looked up, Alexander was studying her not with victory, but with something that almost looked like regret. He reached into his coat pocket, placed the platinum ring in front of her, and said quietly, "It is done." The silence stretched between them like glass about to break. The waiter approached with 2 untouched cups of coffee, steam curling into the dim air, and for a brief second Lily thought how strange that life could change completely while the world around her stayed so calm. Alexander stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced grace. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "City Hall, 10 o'clock. Then he turned to leave, leaving behind the faint scent of cedar and rain. Lily remained at the table long after he was gone, her fingers brushing the cold rim of the ring box. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass windows, blurring into streaks of gold and gray. She could see her own reflection, too young, too scared, but still breathing. And for a fleeting second, she whispered to herself, "This is not love. This is survival." But somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the deal she could not refuse, a single thought flickered. What kind of man offers a contract instead of a heart? She did not know yet that the answer would change both of their lives forever. The city courthouse stood tall and silent under the pale morning Sunday. The marble steps gleamed after a night of rain, and the air smelled faintly of wet stone and coffee from the vendor across the street. Lily Carter stood at the foot of the stairs, clutching a small clutch bag with trembling fingers. The platinum ring inside felt heavier than it should have. A black car pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out first, opening the door. Then Alexander Reed emerged, dressed in a charcoal suit, his expression unreadable. He glanced at her once, nodded politely, and offered his arm without a word. Lily hesitated for half a second, then took it. His sleeve was cool beneath her hand. Together they climbed the courthouse steps, 2 people walking into a contract that neither believed in. Inside, the ceremony lasted less than 15 minutes. No flowers, no music, no family. Just the clerk's monotone voice echoing off the marble walls. "Do you, Alexander Reed, take Lily Carter to be your lawful wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was steady, almost too steady. "And do you, Lily Carter, take Alexander Reed to be your lawful wedded husband?" Lily's throat tightened. Her lips moved before her heart could protest. "I do." When the clerk pronounced them husband and wife, she felt nothing, no warmth, no joy, only the cold weight of the ring sliding onto her finger. It was beautiful, but it felt like a shackle made of light. Alexander thanked the clerk, shook his hand, and turned to her. "Come," he said quietly. "We have a long day ahead." They left the courthouse to the sound of city traffic and distant horns. The world kept moving, unaware that two strangers had just tied their lives together with signatures and silence. In the car, the air was heavy with words unsaid. Lily stared out the window, watching skyscrapers pass like indifferent giants. She wanted to ask something, anything, but every question seemed too small compared to the life she had just signed away. Finally, Alexander broke the silence. "You will have your own space in the house. Privacy, comfort, anything you need. If anyone asks, this marriage is real. That is all that matters." His voice was calm, but beneath it she heard something else, a trace of exhaustion, or maybe loneliness. Lily turned slightly toward him. "And what about you?" He met her gaze for a brief second, his eyes gray like storm clouds. "I stopped asking for what I want a long time ago." The car continued down the road, past rows of luxury stores and glass towers that glittered like false promises. By noon, they reached the Reed mansion. The gate opened slowly, revealing a sprawling estate framed by tall cypress trees and white roses blooming along the path. The house itself was vast, a mixture of glass and stone, beautiful but somehow empty. As Lily stepped inside, her heels clicked softly on the marble floor. The air smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish. The foyer stretched high above her, with a chandelier that looked like frozen light. A housekeeper greeted them with a polite nod. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reed." The words made Lily flinch. Mrs. Reed. It did not feel real. It felt like she was borrowing someone else's name. Alexander turned to the staff. "Prepare the west wing for Mrs. Reed. She will stay there." Then, facing Lily again, he added, "Dinner is at 7. You do not need to join if you prefer to rest." She nodded silently. As he walked away, his footsteps faded into the long hallways, leaving her standing alone in the middle of a life too large for her to fit in. She wandered through the west wing, past framed art and silent rooms that smelled of wealth and absence. When she reached her new bedroom, she paused. The curtains were half open, letting in a soft glow that made the space look almost tender. On the bed lay a single white box. Inside was a simple dress, folded neatly with a note on top. "Wear something comfortable. The world is heavy enough already." The handwriting was sharp yet elegant, his. Lily sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the words until her vision blurred. She was used to orders, to being told what to do, but this note, it felt different. Not a command, a gesture. For the first time that day, her chest loosened just a little. Outside, clouds drifted across the afternoon sky. She could see the gardens from her window, long rows of trimmed hedges, and a single fountain in the center, where water shimmered like liquid glass. In the distance, Alexander stood near the balcony, speaking on his phone. His posture was straight, composed, but his face looked tired in the sunlight. For a moment, she wondered what kind of life a man like him lived behind the calm surface, what kind of loneliness hides behind power. Then she looked down at her ring again, the thin circle of platinum catching the light. It was not a symbol of love. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, it did not have to stay a chain forever. As evening settled, Lily changed into the simple dress from the box. She walked slowly through the quiet halls, past portraits of people she did not know, until she reached the grand staircase. From the dining hall came the faint sound of a piano, soft, hesitant notes drifting through the house like a whisper. She stopped, her hand resting on the banister, and listened. Somewhere inside that cold mansion, a melody was playing that did not belong to business meetings or contracts. It sounded human and fragile. For the first time since signing her name, Lily wondered if this story might be more than a transaction. Maybe it was the beginning of something she did not yet understand. The following evening came wrapped in soft music and too much silence. The Reed mansion glowed with the kind of warmth that looked beautiful from the outside but felt hollow within. The dining room was large enough for 20 guests, but only 2 chairs were set at the long oak table. Lily entered quietly, her steps light, her heart unsure of what to expect. The chandelier above scattered light across crystal glasses and silver cutlery, each piece reflecting the perfection of a world that was not hers. Alexander was already there, seated at the far end of the table. He looked up from a folder, his expression calm but unreadable. "Good evening, Mrs. Reed," he said. The title still sounded foreign. "Good evening," she replied softly, taking the seat across from him. Dinner arrived on fine china roasted vegetables, salmon glazed with honey and lemon, and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than her entire savings. Lily lifted her fork with care, but the silence between them was louder than the clinking of silver. After a moment, Alexander spoke. "You do not have to pretend to be comfortable. This arrangement, it is not meant to be easy." Lily looked up. "You make it sound like a sentence." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Perhaps it is." For both of us. For the first time, she saw something flicker in his eyes, regret, or maybe exhaustion. He was a man who had built empires but lost the art of belonging. When the meal ended, Alexander stood. "There is something you should see," he said. He walked her through a hallway lined with portraits and stopped before a large oak door. Inside was a study filled with books, maps, and sketches of architectural designs. On the wall hung a photograph of a woman elegant, smiling, with eyes that mirrored the same shade of gray as his. "My wife," he said simply. "She passed away 8 years ago." Lily froze. "I am sorry," she whispered. "She was the reason this house exists. Every detail, every line of stone. But after she died, it became—" He paused, searching for the right word. "A museum of what was." Lily turned toward the shelves, noticing a small framed drawing lavender fields under a spring sky. It was not professional, but it was tender. "Did she paint this?" He nodded. "She said lavender is for healing. I never believed her then. Now I wish I had." The room fell quiet again, filled only by the faint ticking of a clock. Lily felt the weight of his solitude pressing against her own. 2 strangers, bound by paper, surrounded by ghosts. When she finally excused herself, Alexander simply nodded. "Good night, Lily." Good night," she answered, though the words felt too formal for the ache in her chest. She walked back to her room through the dim corridor. The scent of lavender lingered faintly in the air, and for the first time, she wondered if it came from the garden or from the memory that lived inside these walls. In her room, she found the same book she had seen in his hand during their first meeting, The Art of Patience. It was resting on her nightstand, with a small note inside. Page 42. "It helped me once. Maybe it will help you." She opened it. The line was simple. "Sometimes respect is louder than love, and silence can heal what words destroy." Lily read it twice, her fingers tracing the ink. She did not know why, but her eyes burned. She had spent her whole life being told what to do, what to accept, what to endure. Yet this stranger, this powerful man, had given her space instead of control. Later that night, she stepped out into the garden. The moon hung low over the lavender beds, silvering every petal. She stood barefoot on the cold stone path, breathing in the quiet air. Behind her, the faint sound of the piano reached through the open window. The same melody she had heard before, gentle, hesitant, as if the notes themselves were learning to trust again. She walked closer to the light spilling from the music room. Alexander sat by the grand piano, his shoulders slightly bent, his fingers moving across the keys like someone speaking a language only he understood. He stopped when he saw her reflection in the glass. "Could not sleep?" he asked. "Not really," she said softly. "The music is beautiful." "It was written for her," he admitted. "It is called The Promise of Spring. I stopped playing it years ago." "Then why now?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because for the first time the house does not feel completely empty." The words settled between them, fragile and real. Lily took a step closer, drawn by something she could not name. "Do you believe people can start over?" she asked. Alexander's eyes softened. "Only if they learn to forgive the past." They stood there for a moment, in the quiet glow of the piano light, the air between them warmer than it had any right to be. When she finally turned to leave, he said quietly, "Lily, you do not owe me anything. You never did." She paused at the doorway. "Maybe not, but you gave me something I never had before." He tilted his head. "What is that?" "Peace." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it echoed in his chest long after she was gone. As Lily closed her bedroom door, she glanced once more at the platinum ring on her finger. It no longer looked like a shackle. It looked like a key one that might unlock something neither of them had dared to hope for. The night after the piano felt longer than usual. The air outside the Reed mansion was still, and the wind carried the faint scent of rain through the open windows. Lily lay awake, her eyes tracing the ceiling's soft shadows, her mind circling the same thought. Why did kindness from him feel more disarming than any cruelty she had known? The house was quiet except for the ticking of a clock somewhere down the hall. She turned onto her side, trying to calm her heartbeat, when the door opened slightly. The light from the hallway cut across the room, and Alexander stepped in, dressed simply in a gray shirt and dark slacks. He was holding a book in one hand and a folded blanket in the other. "I did not mean to wake you," he said softly. "You did not," she replied, sitting up slightly. "Is something wrong?" He shook his head. "No, I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable. This room tends to get cold at night." He placed the blanket on the sofa near the window and hesitated. "You do not have to do anything, Lily. Not tonight, not ever, if you do not wish to." His tone was calm, but his words struck her harder than any demand could have. She looked at him, trying to understand. "Why are you saying that?" He met her gaze, steady but gentle. "Because people have taken enough from you already. I will not be one of them." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the rain beginning to fall outside. He turned to leave, but something in her voice stopped him. "You could sleep here," she said quietly. "On the sofa, I mean. It is too late to work again." Alexander hesitated, studying her face for a sign of fear, but there was none. "If that makes you feel safer, I will stay." He walked over, set the book on the table, and settled onto the sofa. The fabric creaked under his weight, and the room filled with an unfamiliar peace. Lily lay back down, her eyes watching him in the dim light. He opened the book, The Art of Patience, and began to read silently. Minutes passed. The rain grew heavier, tapping softly against the window. Lily's eyes grew heavy, her breathing slowed, and for the first time since her father's death, she fell asleep without feeling the need to guard herself. When she woke again, the first thing she saw was Alexander, still on the sofa, his head tilted slightly back, the book resting open on his chest. Morning light spilled across the room, soft and golden. For a moment, she simply watched him the way his hair caught the light, the faint lines around his eyes that made him look less like a billionaire and more like a man who had once forgotten how to rest. She rose quietly, pulled the blanket over his shoulders, and whispered, "Thank you." Later that morning, as she walked through the hallway toward the kitchen, she noticed something small but new, a vase of lavender placed on the console table. Its fragrance filled the air with calm sweetness. She knew he had done it. At breakfast, he was already there, sipping coffee. He looked up briefly. "You slept well?" She nodded. "Better than I expected." "Good." He folded the newspaper and set it aside. "I will be away most of the day. If you need anything, Mrs. Ellis can help." Lily smiled faintly. "You really do not have to manage me like a guest." He raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement flickering in his voice. "And how should I treat you?" "As a person," she said simply. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Fair enough." The hours passed quietly after he left. Lily wandered through the house, discovering small details, a painting half-finished in the art room, a piano key repaired recently, an old photograph tucked into a bookcase showing Alexander much younger, laughing with someone unseen. The mansion, she realized, was filled with stories that no one had touched for years. That evening, as twilight crept in, Lily decided to repay his kindness in her own small way. She went to the kitchen and asked the housekeeper if she could make tea herself. After a short debate and several nervous laughs, she managed to prepare 2 cups, one of chamomile for her, one of black tea for him. When Alexander returned, rain still on his coat, she was waiting in the reading room, 2 cups steaming on the table. He paused at the doorway, surprised. "You made this?" "I tried," she said with a shy smile. "You gave me lavender. I thought I should return the favor." He sat down across from her, lifted the cup, and took a sip. "It is strong," he said carefully. Her eyes widened. "Too strong?" He smiled, a small, genuine smile that softened his entire face. "It is perfect." The sound of rain outside filled the silence that followed. They drank slowly, neither needing to speak. It was not the silence of strangers anymore, it was something warmer, safer. When the clock struck 9, Alexander stood. "Lily," he said, his voice low but clear. "You remind me that stillness can be more powerful than control." She blinked, unsure how to respond. "I do not understand." "You will," he said. "In time." He turned to leave, but before he reached the door, Lily called softly, "Good night, Alexander." He stopped, looked back, and nodded once. "Good night, Lily." After he was gone, she sat for a long time, staring at the empty teacup in her hands. The mansion no longer felt like a cage. For the first time, it felt like a place where she could breathe. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Somewhere in the house, she heard faint music again, soft, hesitant, the same melody as before. And for the first time, Lily did not feel like a guest in his world. She felt like she had just opened a door to her own. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm inside the Reed mansion began to change. What had once been silent corridors now carried the faint echo of life again, soft footsteps, distant laughter from the kitchen, and the sound of the piano drifting through the halls at unpredictable hours. Lily woke each morning to a new vase of flowers near her window. Some days it was white roses, other days lavender, and once a single sunflower standing tall in a glass of water. She never asked who placed them there, but she always knew. Alexander had a way of noticing things without asking, of offering comfort without touching. At first, they moved through the same spaces like careful strangers, she in the garden, he in his study. But over time, their paths began to cross naturally. One afternoon, she found him in the greenhouse, sleeves rolled up, adjusting the soil of a potted fern. She had never imagined a man like him stoic, controlled, powerful, kneeling in the dirt with such quiet focus. "I thought billionaires had people to do this," she said gently. Alexander looked up, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Some things should be done by hand. They remind us what effort feels like." Lily crouched beside him. "Then maybe you could teach me." He handed her a small shovel. "It is not about teaching, it is about patience." For the next hour, they worked side by side, planting small lavender seeds in neat rows. The air smelled of soil and sunlight. She noticed how his hands, though large and strong, handled each sprout as if it were fragile. There was something deeply human in that small act, something she could not quite name yet. That night, she found herself thinking about the look on his face when he smiled, not the polite smile of a businessman, but the kind that reached his eyes for the first time. Over the next few days, respect became their unspoken language. When she entered a room, he would quietly close his laptop. When he worked late, she would leave a cup of tea on his desk without a word. Neither of them mentioned these gestures, but both noticed. One morning, she walked into the kitchen to find a sketch pad lying on the counter. On the first page was a drawing of a lavender field under a bright sky. Beneath it, in neat handwriting, he had written, "For the garden, we will build together." Lily traced the lines with her fingertips, her heart tightening with something she could not deny anymore. Later that evening, she joined him for dinner. The table was smaller this time, only set for two near the fireplace instead of the long hall. The flames flickered against his face, softening the hard lines of his expression. "You have been quiet lately," he said as he poured her a glass of water. "I have been thinking," she replied, "about how people change when someone finally sees them." Alexander looked at her, truly looked at her. "And do you feel seen now?" She hesitated before nodding. "For the first time, yes." He leaned back slightly. "Then I am glad I stayed." The words hung between them, simple but heavy. She wanted to ask stayed where in the house. In this arrangement. In her life, but his expression told her everything she needed to know. After dinner, she lingered by the piano as he played a few soft notes. The melody was slow, tender, and incomplete. "It sounds different," she said. "It is a new version," he replied. "The old one belonged to someone who was grieving. This one is for someone learning to live again." Lily stood beside him, the glow of the fire reflecting off the polished wood. "Then keep playing," she whispered. "It suits you." He looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, time folded in on itself, the sound of the rain, the fire, the piano, all blending into something weightless. Later that night, Lily could not sleep. She walked barefoot into the garden, the ground cool beneath her feet. The lavender plants they had planted together were small but strong, reaching toward the moonlight. She knelt down, brushed her fingers over the soft leaves, and smiled. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Alexander stood near the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You are awake," he said softly. "I could say the same for you." He walked closer, stopping just a few feet away. "The lavender is growing well." "They are," she said. "It seems patience really works." He nodded. "It always does, when it comes from the right place." The wind carried the faint scent of lavender between them. It was a quiet moment, almost ordinary, yet charged with something deeper, something neither dared to name. "Lily," he said after a pause, "you have changed this house." "How so?" "It used to feel like a monument. Now it feels like a home." Her chest tightened. "Then maybe it was not the house that changed," she said softly. "Maybe it was the people inside it." He smiled, the kind of smile that felt like a secret shared between two hearts. "Perhaps you are right." When she returned to her room that night, she found another note on her nightstand in the same elegant handwriting. "Respect is the highest form of love." She read it twice, her fingers brushing the ink, and placed it inside the art of patience. Outside, the garden swayed gently under the moonlight. The lavender they had planted together shimmered in silver hues. For the first time, Lily no longer felt trapped by the contract that had brought her here. She felt chosen not by circumstance, but by kindness. And that, she realized, was more powerful than any promise written on paper. The storm arrived without warning. Heavy rain hammered the windows of the Reed mansion, turning the glass into a blurred canvas of light and shadow. Thunder rumbled like a heartbeat in the distance. Lily woke abruptly, her breath short, her skin damp with sweat. The nightmare had returned, the same one that had haunted her since the night of the accident. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to steady her breathing, but the tremors would not stop. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of headlights, heard her mother's voice, and then silence. A silence so final it felt like drowning. The door opened quietly. Alexander stood there, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly wet, as if he had been standing near an open window. "Lily," he said gently, "I heard something. Are you all right?" She tried to answer, but her voice caught. "It was the dream again. He stepped inside without another word, walking slowly, leaving enough distance between them. The lightning illuminated his face, calm, concerned, never pitying. He pulled a chair beside her bed and sat down, his elbows resting on his knees. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked quietly. Lily hesitated. For years, she had kept her grief buried beneath politeness and forced smiles. But something about his tone, the steady warmth of it, made the words escape before she could stop them. "I was 15, she began, her voice trembling. "We were driving home from a weekend trip. My father was humming some old song. My mother kept fixing my hair in the back seat. And then it happened. The car lost control. I remember the sound of glass breaking, and then the world just disappeared. When I woke up, they were gone." The rain outside softened, as if the world itself were listening. "I used to think I should have gone with them," she whispered. "That maybe surviving was the mistake." Alexander's face tightened, not with judgment, but with recognition. He spoke slowly, as if each word was chosen with care. "You did not survive by mistake, Lily. You survived because you still have something to live for. Sometimes life keeps us here to remind others that hope can exist, even when love is gone." She looked up at him, tears catching the dim light. "Did you ever lose something you could not replace?" He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, heavier. "Yes. My wife, Claire. We built this house together. She was light, steady, certain, kind. When she died, I did not cry. I just stopped living. For years I existed only in this house, surrounded by everything she left behind. I thought if I kept it all exactly the same, she would somehow still be here." Lily's eyes softened. "That is why you keep the lavender," she said quietly. He nodded. "She believed in healing. I did not, until you arrived." The confession lingered in the air, fragile and raw. She could feel the truth in his voice, the years of silence, the slow erosion of a man who had forgotten how to be human. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his. The contact was light, almost hesitant, but it grounded them both. "You do not have to hold it alone anymore," she said. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw them unguarded. No walls, no contracts, just a man carrying the weight of love lost and rediscovered. Nor do you, he replied softly. The next moment passed like a breath. He lifted his hand, brushed away the tear that had escaped down her cheek, and said, "You are stronger than you think, Lily. And you," she said, "are kinder than you allow yourself to be." Huh. They stayed like that for a long while, two souls caught between the past and something that was quietly blooming in the present. The thunder faded, leaving only the soft rhythm of rain against the glass. Eventually, Alexander leaned back in the chair. "I should let you rest," he said. She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could stay, just for a while." He looked at her, unsure, then nodded. "If that is what you want." He sat at the edge of the bed, close, but not too close. The space between them was filled with unspoken understanding. Lily shifted slightly, her breathing finally slowing. "I used to be afraid of nights," she murmured, eyes half closed. They always brought silence, and silence meant remembering. "And now?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Now it feels like peace." He exhaled, a quiet sound almost like relief. "Then it is enough." Her eyelids grew heavy. The fear that had held her for years melted away under the simple presence of someone who did not demand anything, who simply stayed. Before sleep took her, she whispered, "Thank you, Alexander." He looked down at her, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "You do not need to thank me. You already gave me more than you know." When Lily fell asleep, Alexander remained still, watching the soft rise and fall of her breath. The lightning had stopped. Outside, the lavender garden shimmered beneath the rain, its purple blooms bending gently under the weight of water. He glanced toward the window, then back at her. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him, a quiet release, a permission to feel again. He whispered almost to himself, "Maybe healing was never meant to happen alone." As dawn began to color the edges of the sky, Alexander stood, placed the blanket gently over her, and walked toward the door. But before leaving, he turned once more, his gaze lingering on the sleeping girl who had brought life back into his house and into his heart. The storm had ended, but something new had begun. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, filling the Reed mansion with a warmth it had not felt in years. The storm was gone, and the world outside looked washed clean, fresh, and calm. Lily awoke to the gentle sound of birds beyond the garden, the memory of the night before still soft in her mind. She sat up slowly, the blanket tucked neatly around her shoulders. Alexander must have placed it before leaving. On her nightstand rested a cup of chamomile tea, still warm, and a note written in his careful handwriting. "Breakfast is ready in the garden, if you feel like joining me." She smiled for the first time that morning. There was something simple yet intimate about it, an invitation without expectation, a moment waiting to be shared. When she stepped outside, the air smelled of rain and lavender. Alexander was already seated beneath the pergola, wearing a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his eyes softened by the morning light. On the table sat toast, fruit, and 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning," he said, his tone gentle. "Good morning," she replied. "You make this place look like a painting." He smiled faintly. "Nature did most of the work. I only asked her to cooperate." They sat together in quiet comfort, the sunlight flickering through the vines above. For the first time, Lily noticed he looked different, less guarded, more human. His laughter came easier, his movements unhurried. After breakfast, Alexander led her toward the far end of the garden where the new lavender patch had begun to bloom. The flowers were still small, but they stood proudly, their soft purple hues glowing against the green. "They grew faster than I expected," Lily said, kneeling to touch the petals. "That is what happens when something finally finds care," he replied. "Even fragile things can grow strong when they are not afraid anymore." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the light. "Do you think that applies to people too?" He nodded slowly. "Especially to people." For a moment, the world fell silent. The breeze carried the scent of lavender, and Lily realized she was no longer afraid to breathe deeply. She was not the girl who had signed a contract to survive. She was someone learning how to live. That afternoon, she found Alexander in the library, standing by the piano. His hand rested on the lid as if deciding whether to play. When he noticed her, he smiled, that quiet smile she had begun to wait for. "Do you still write music?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said, "but lately, I find it easier to play than to write. Words can be heavy. Music feels lighter." "Then play," she said softly. He sat down, and the first notes of the promise of spring filled the room. The melody was familiar, but gentler now, carrying no sorrow, only grace. Lily moved closer, sitting beside him on the bench. Their shoulders brushed slightly, a simple touch that spoke volume. When he finished, the silence that followed was full of warmth. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "Different from before." He turned to her, his gray eyes reflecting the soft light. "That is because grief was the composer then," he said. "Now, hope is." Lily smiled, her heart full and steady. "Then let it keep playing." For a moment, Alexander just looked at her, truly looked, and the faintest hint of a real smile curved his lips, a smile that reached his eyes, the kind that comes only after years of silence. The music still lingered between them, soft and alive, as if the house itself was breathing again. And in that quiet bloom of morning light and piano notes, two souls who had once been strangers finally began to belong. That evening, the Reed mansion glowed under a full moon. The air was calm, carrying the soft fragrance of blooming lavender from the garden. The lights inside the house were dim, and only the faint notes of piano music lingered like a memory. Lily stepped outside barefoot, the stone path cool beneath her feet. She wore a light dress, and the wind played gently with her hair. The garden shimmered in silver light, every petal catching the reflection of the moon. She stopped by the lavender patch, running her fingertips along the flowers they had planted together. For weeks, she had felt a quiet shift between them, unspoken but undeniable. Respect had turned into care. Care had deepened into something softer, something she no longer dared to name. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Alexander's voice broke the silence, low and warm. "You could not sleep either?" She turned, smiling faintly. "It is too peaceful to sleep through. I did not want to miss the night." He approached slowly, his steps deliberate. He was wearing a dark sweater, his hair slightly tousled, his expression gentle. "You are right," he said. "Some nights are not meant to be slept through. They are meant to be felt." They stood side by side in front of the lavender field. The moonlight fell across his face, softening the lines time had carved there. Lily looked at him for a long moment, her heart steady but full. "I used to think safety meant silence," she said quietly. "That if I stayed small and careful, the world would not break me again. But now, silence feels too heavy. This feels different." Alexander's eyes met hers. "Because silence is not the same as peace. You brought that difference into this house." She looked down, her fingers brushing the ring on her hand, the same ring that had once felt like a cage. "I think peace is what love sounds like when it stops pretending to be perfect." The words hung between them like soft music. He took a small step closer, his voice low. "Are you afraid right now?" She shook her head. "No, just aware." "Of what?" "Of how easy it feels to stand here with you." For a moment, neither moved. The night held its breath. The world shrank to the space between them, the scent of lavender, the rhythm of their breathing, the quiet hum of life returning to places once empty. Alexander lifted his hand, slow and deliberate, giving her time to pull away if she wished. She did not. His fingers brushed her cheek, light as air. Her pulse quickened, but it was not fear, it was recognition. "Lily," he whispered, "if this is wrong, tell me to stop." She met his eyes. "It is not wrong." The space between them vanished. His hand moved to the back of her neck. Her palm found his chest, and their lips met in a kiss that was neither hurried nor perfect. It was gentle, trembling, real. The world seemed to pause. The night breeze stirred the lavender, and the fountain whispered softly nearby. When they pulled away, their foreheads remained pressed together, their breaths mingling. Alexander's voice was barely audible. "I had forgotten what this felt like." "How?" She smiled through tears she did not realize had fallen. "You mean love?" He hesitated, then nodded. "No, I mean being alive." Lily laughed quietly, the sound breaking the night's stillness. "Then we are both learning again." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You have no idea what you have done to me, Lily Carter." "Yes, I do," she said, her tone soft but sure. "The same thing you did for me. You made me believe again." "Oh." They stood there, hands intertwined, surrounded by the garden they had brought back to life. The moonlight fell across the lavender like a blessing. In that moment, love did not need permission, and healing no longer asked for an explanation. Two broken hearts had finally found their rhythm, quiet, steady, and whole. Weeks passed, and the mansion that had once felt like a cage now breathed like a living heart. The lavender bloomed in full, filling every corner of the garden with its calming scent. The piano no longer played for ghosts, but for the quiet joy of ordinary days. One morning, as sunlight poured through the glass windows, Alexander stood in the study reading a letter from the board of Reed Holdings. Rumors had begun to spread whispers that his marriage was only for appearances. He folded the letter slowly, his expression unreadable. That afternoon, he called for a meeting with the board. The conference room was filled with polished suits, curious eyes, and the kind of silence that waits for scandal. Lily sat in the back, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Alexander spoke with calm authority. "You are right," he said, his voice steady. "When this marriage began, it was a contract. I will not deny that. But what started as an obligation became something far more real than any of you could understand." A low murmur rippled through the room. He continued, "I no longer need a contract to prove stability. I have found it in something stronger. Love that asks for nothing, yet gives everything." He stepped away from the table and turned toward Lily. Every eye followed him as he crossed the room. Stopping in front of her, he removed the platinum ring from his finger, the same one he had given her under the terms of that cold agreement. He knelt down, the entire room holding its breath. "This time, no clauses, no signatures, no conditions," he said softly. "Lily Carter Reed, will you stay not because you have to, but because you choose to?" Tears filled her eyes. She stood, shaking her head lightly as if to steady herself, then whispered, "Yes, because now it is not survival, it is love." He smiled openly, freely, and slipped the ring back onto her finger. This time, it was warm. When they left the building, the city air felt lighter, the sky brighter than it had been in years. Months later, Lily opened a small art and flower gallery downtown called Lavender and Light. Its windows were filled with sketches of gardens, sunlit portraits, and vases of lavender that carried the same scent as the mansion that had once saved her. On the counter sat two things: the book The Art of Patience and a framed music sheet titled The Promise of Spring. Every evening, Alexander would come by after work, sometimes just to sit by the window and listen as she arranged flowers. Neither of them spoke much anymore. They did not need to. One night, as the lights dimmed and the last customer left, Lily turned to him and said quietly, "Do you ever think about how it all began?" He smiled. "Every day. It reminds me that even the coldest contracts can become the truest promises when hearts choose honesty." "Oh." She took his hand, resting it over her heart. "Respect," she whispered, "was where it began. Love was what it became." Outside, the evening breeze carried the scent of lavender through the open door. And in that quiet, gentle light, they knew their story had never been about power, money, or survival. It had always been about grace, two souls finding each other when they had almost forgotten how to feel.